I do believe that collectives are the best form of capitalism. It's good for society. It's a better form of business.
That's Freddie Laker, who's about to break down how to actually build real communities that people want to be a part of. Welcome back to the Corporate Detox, the podcast where we talk about work, ambition, and life in and after corporate. Because, mi gente, we needed this. It's me, Elisa, longtime marketing expert and your favorite corporate escape artist. Freddie is a former CEO and CMO who went from building traditional companies to questioning how people actually come together and stay connected. He's now the founder of Chameleon Collective. And before that, he moved through startups and leadership roles across consumer tech, aviation, DTC. But what he kept coming back to wasn't the companies themselves. It was the people inside them and what made them actually stick together. And over time, that turned into a bigger question. What if the way we think about building communities is fundamentally broken? And that question is what brings us into this moment, when a couple of bad experiences almost broke him.
I didn't want to work for someone, and I was kind of like angry. I'd had like a couple bad experiences, and I was like, screw it. I mean, I literally was thinking about moving to Costa Rica to become a game streamer for Twitch.
Stop it, Freddie.
Yeah,
Stop
seriously.
it.
My wife was like, "We're not moving to Costa Rica." Like I was thinking crazy stuff. I just didn't care. My first couple companies formed an internet service provider, a digital agency, a machine learning company, actually in 2013, traditional companies. And the third company didn't work out. I thought, what a crazy idea. Why would anyone want to do that? It took text-based online news and summarized it into shorter summaries and then turned it into audio and had avatars read you the news. A company called Synthesia just raised $600 million for that idea. So it turned out it wasn't quite so stupid, just about 13 years too early. When that third company didn't make it, I was in this really weird headspace where I had a company fail. So the concept of going out there and building another traditional company was really unappealing to me. It was a bit scary. I also didn't want to go work for anyone again. What was my only choice? And that was to go out there and be an independent consultant. And I was like, I'm going to get out there. I'm going to be a freelancer. I'm going to be an independent consultant. I'm just going to go do this on my own. And the reality is, when I got out there and I started doing that, you're still an entrepreneur. There's just different sets of problems, right? When you've got a team, there's certain kinds of problems you have to deal with and responsibilities that come along with that. When you're on your own, there's a different set, and they're painful in their own way. And I didn't really like them either, is the reality of it. I missed the infrastructure, the stuff problem, the stuff that kind of comes along with a bigger company that you take for granted. Billing and finances and legal and having people do all this stuff. A lot of people take it for granted. It's kind of like magic. I always joke, it's like water. You wake up in the morning, you turn the faucet on. Like, no one ever stops as they're brushing their teeth. And it's like, how did I get my water today? But that's kind of like how corporate is. There's all this infrastructure you just completely take for granted until you're out on your own and you're out there dealing with it. I missed the community that comes with a traditional corporate environment. I missed some of the consistency and reliability of just making money in a normal way and finding clients and so on. But I tell you what I was not looking forward to again. I didn't want the bureaucracy. I really valued the freedom that let me pick and choose how I wanted to work, where I wanted to work, who I wanted to work with. I was just in this spot where I realized that there wasn't actually a perfect solution for me. There was things I liked about corporate. There was things I liked about being an independent, but there didn't seem to be another alternative. That's actually how Chameleon Collective was born. There had to be a better way, basically.
Okay, now real talk. Every time I scroll on LinkedIn, there's a new community. One for overwhelmed founders, one for senior leaders in transition. Honestly, there's one, I think, for everything. And it makes sense. Communities, they're having a moment. Millions exist now across platforms, from Discord servers to private groups. But if you're wondering what actually makes this kind of community different, it comes down to what Freddie's learned the hard way about what makes people actually stay. Now community is a buzzword, and I think you've even taken it a step further by calling it a we. A collective, a community. Like, what's the nuance between all of those
That's
for
a
you?
great question. So there is a spectrum of a collective. So first, let me explain to everyone what a collective is. And because I think people think they know, but maybe not by the definition of what I talk about, and then how the spectrum looks. So, what is it? There are partnerships. You can have companies where people are partners. There's senior partners, junior partners. They say they're partners, but they're not equal. A collective is when a group of people kind of come together And they have some core tenets that they operate around, like sharing opportunity, sharing infrastructure, sharing risk. But everyone operates on a completely equal governance model. A governance model being a set of rules of how they play together. Kind of like how the US, you've got our states, and everyone kind of agrees how those groups kind of come together. And there's no special parties. Inside Chameleon Collective, if some member of Chameleon Collective makes $100,000 a year, one of us makes $1.5 million a year, the difference between those two people isn't that one of them was my cousin or something like that. It's because they play the game better than other people. We're all playing the same game at Chameleon Collective, and some of us just play it better than others. But I think this sense of a completely equitable system in a world that is very frequently feels like it's rigged is really powerful. Going back to your original question, there are different types of collectives. Sometimes this term gets hijacked, and I see it out there, and they'll say we're a collective. They're not really a collective. Like, Freddie and Friends on LinkedIn. It's like two people, and a collective to them means I'll call my friend Bob, when I can't do the job and that person's in a spreadsheet, but it's not really a collective, right? They kind of imply it's on demand. We're also non-hierarchical, so we have a flat organization. We all have an equal say in the future of the company and so on. So some versions of collectives, maybe they're very community-based. I've seen quite a few of these out here. There's some fractional groups that are primarily like a Slack thing, and they can talk to each other, and that's great, by the way. I love anything where people are coming together, sharing stories, they're sharing insights, they're sharing pain, and they're helping each other informally. And then you've got probably a little bit more formal version of that, where people are like, well, we're going to do this, and maybe we're all going to operate under one brand, and we'll go to market together in a certain way, and maybe we're going to share some infrastructure, and we're going to agree to always try and work on clients together, but we're independents on some level. And then you see really more extreme versions of it, like us, where all of us run our books of business through the collective. If someone pings one of us on LinkedIn or something, we're going to be great. Here's my Chameleon Collective contract. This is home for us. We all contribute a bit of time to the collective. We all contribute a portion of our revenue to the collective, but we use that to co-invest and create a far greater return for all of us. And that's turned out to be, very successful. We also co-own the company, but we're all operating on a standardized governance model. We take this so seriously, by the way. If someone joins Chameleon Collective, sometimes they'll try and negotiate during the process coming in, and we'll say, look, we won't negotiate. It's not because we're unreasonable. It's because if we change your contract, on principle, we will change every other person's contract. Sometimes people say, I want to change this. We actually love that idea. We wrote it down in our list. In fact, we're almost, even if you don't join us, we liked it so much, we're gonna implement it. But the next contract revision is, November 2027. And then we literally will take all that input and have the entire collective, even if you had valid contracts, we'll make every single member of the collective re-sign every 2 years when we basically update the contracts again, just because we're so obsessed with trying to keep everyone on equal footing.
It's the equivalent of being in a brand is the difference between being an operator versus an owner-operator. Yeah. It's this higher form of participation that you're talking about, which I really love. And for all the people starting communities, the challenge being, can you make this also a collective?
I want to be honest in saying I did it by accident. And that's how it started, this kind of thing.
Starting Chameleon Collective. And, when did you feel that maybe solo is limiting?
I just always seem to have a lot of opportunity, and I'm just always looking for collaborators. The honest truth is, in the beginning of the collective, I'd kind of sworn to anyone that would listen to me that I would never start another business again. I talked about it for over a year. The entrepreneur in me really struggles to turn down opportunity, and I kept turning down opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And new things that kept popping up, I just couldn't take it on. I was already booked up, already had the business, and I was like, I really hate leaving all this opportunity on the table. I wanted to capture it, but I sure as hell didn't want to capture it like I used to, which meant hiring a bunch of people, putting a bunch of people in salary, getting some kind of office, building some kind of traditional company, and having all the roads lead back to me. It's just not something I was interested in anymore. It's how I got this great haircut. I don't need that kind of stress in my life anymore. Just not something that appealed to me. When I was younger, there was a big part of my personality that needed to shine through and everything. And there was a lot of me and everything that I did. I just don't care about that kind of stuff anymore, And so I really was like, I'm in a place where I get a lot more joy and fulfillment through saying we. And so this concept that I could find people that were my partners and were on equal status, and people that I was looking for that were willing to take some of the risk alongside of me and then share on the upside and share in everything. It's really the core concept of collectivism was really appealing to me. I just never dreamt it would work quite so well.
Was there ever a moment when you're just like, okay, I need to tap into the power of people, not just being alone?
I read this book about Paphos, and they use this management style called holacracy, where effectively the leadership structure reorganizes on the fly, depending on, in our case, who owns the client relationship. I didn't even finish the book, but I was like, okay, I think I get this holacracy thing. We're gonna try this. I didn't care because we weren't starting a company in my head, right? We were like doing crazy stuff, right?
There's a freedom for it. Yeah.
Whatever. We're not really starting a company. The biggest thing that I learned was it is really, really hard for people, especially alpha people, to start putting something together and not say, well, I put it together, I'm going to be this, and then everyone else is going to be subservient to me, right? If you are an A player, a true A player, which is really what you want, right? You want to surround yourself with A players. Why would an A player ever take the B player deal if they're really an A player? They won't, is the answer. You're not for long. You know what I mean? Maybe they're having a bad day and they need to use you as a stepping stone, but they're not going to stick around. The only way an A player stays with another A player is if the A players have absolutely the same deal terms. And so we were like, I was like, I don't want to be your boss. I want a partner, but it means you also need to operate like I do. And some people can keep up with that and some people can't. I think in the beginning, people really need to stress this we over me thing. If you're trying to get people to join your band, you're going to find yourself pretty quick, in pretty short order, starting a company where you have a bunch of employees. But if you're trying to start a collective and you're trying to find people that share your values and want to contribute in the way that you do and benefit, by the way, it's bi-directional, right? But they're willing to contribute. They're not just there to feed off whatever you've got. And you need to make sure you're saying, hey, look, what's good for me is good for thee. And I'm going to let you operate on the same terms I am. But we're all assuming risk together. In a collective, no one's on a salary. We're all agreeing to work a certain way. You eat what you kill. And some people are really good at that, and some people not so much. I just think if you're a solo operator, doing hunting in packs and operating in packs is safer. It de-risks it. The analogy that I love to give sometimes is when you think about a career, on one side of the career, you've got a traditional job. You show up for work. You don't tick your boss off too much. You get your paycheck. It's pretty predictable, so it's low risk, but it's low reward. They're kind of taking all the upside, but you're getting that consistency. You don't have much choice in how you work, who you work with, who you work for, when you work. That freedom is gone, but you do have that consistency. And there's a community, which is nice. And you got stuff. You've got the infrastructure. Opposite end of the spectrum. You got being a freelancer, an independent. It can be great, right? You got a lot of freedom. You can pick and choose how you work, who you work with, who you work for, when you work. Most of the time, I say that because if you struggle financially a bit, even that freedom can be taken away from you. But theoretically, if things are good, at least you've got that, right? You don't have the stuff, you don't have the community, but there's a lot of upside. You can theoretically maximize as much of your dollars you can, right? Because you're taking it straight from the straight from the horse's mouth. Collective is somewhere in between these two things. You still have the independent thinking, all the freedom that comes with some minor exceptions, like, hey, we're going to agree to operate as a group. But you know that when you're going into it, because that's the governance model you agreed to. You at least know what you're giving up right off the bat. It's not made up on the day by your boss or your boss's boss changing, which somehow screws up your career. You still maintain that freedom, but you have the stuff and the infrastructure. You've got the community. You put more money in your pocket than the traditional job. It's probably less than like a straight freelancer on some level, but you've also de-risked it. And a lot of times, I think people always tell me, people get scared. And there's a reason, by the way. It's freaking scary. It's scary as hell to go out there and do this on your own. And it feels even on some level, the economy feels a bit iffy. People are going to go, is this really the right time? And that's when a tribe really matters. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I totally. You said how this idea was by accident. But one learning I'm having is for people who are thinking of getting confidence in what they go after, surround yourself by the right people and the right ideas will organize themselves. I wonder, how hard is that to engineer? What was the first project after realizing that there was this opportunity and you had your co-partners? Who conquered what? How did it start?
Yeah, great question. One opportunity, kind of just like I was booked up, some other things made sense to hand to some of these other folks I've been
Yeah.
talking to. And at
Yeah.
anyone I ran into who was a consultant, I just started asking him, how's it going? What's working? What's not working? I really just wanted to hear what as many people said as possible. I probably had that conversation 40 or 50 times. And I just started to see certain patterns. A lot of those patterns hold up very much today. I think there's new disruptions we've navigated over the last 10 years. But I can tell you every single one of those disruptions was easier because I was in a collective and not trying to go do this on my own. I am surrounded by more A players now than I've ever been in my life that basically values creating A player deals for everybody. Does everyone get A player results? No, absolutely not. But that's not because the company didn't give them the A player deal. It's because they couldn't operate it as well as some of the other people in the business. And I think there's something really cool about that, frankly.
You started with the staffing one project, right? And maybe you'll correct me. The billing portion, the admin stuff that now is a val prop for the Chameleon Collective, maybe wasn't there at the beginning.
I am a man of extremes and I tend to go pretty hard on most things I do. And in the very, very beginning, we did start running everything through one LLC right off the bat, literally on the first deal, for a very odd reason, frankly. I'd spent a lot of time getting through procurement and I knew that that client wouldn't work with this other person directly. And so I was like, well, we should run it through me. And then that became part of the logic. It's a lot easier if only one of us has to get through procurement versus every single one of us having to renegotiate contracts every time with clients. It's a pain in the ass. Clients don't want to deal with that. So we did it that way early on. But I really want to stress that people should not see that as a barrier to doing this. So I think the first step when you see the beginnings of a collective coming together, don't even form a company. Find some people that share your belief systems. Agree even informally on what are the beginnings of what your governance model is.
At one point, I had to stop him because he's throwing around words like collective, governance model, DAO. And I was like, wait, what does that actually mean in real life? Because when you're building something with other people, it really just comes down to one thing: who decides what and when. And if you don't figure that out early, things get messy and fast.
Hey, when this happens, we're going to do this. This happens, we're going to do this. And when this happens, we're going to do this. And then try and do some work together and see how it goes. I'm a big fan of dating before getting married. Try and get those conversations started. As it starts to make sense, then kind of refine those rules. Main reason being, by the way, you don't want to spend money on lawyers until you kind of pressure tested some of this thinking, put some money in it. One of the things that people who are listening heard me mention this in governance models a couple times. So I just want to explain what that means. I don't know about anyone. I don't know about you. I get a long contract from a client. I'm like, oh,
yeah, I remember it.
Here we go. You know what I mean? This is going to be a nightmare. And in our case, long governance model, what it does is it says, in this scenario, we're going to do this. In this scenario, we're going to do this, right? It's the foundation of a contract. But what most contracts do, especially employment contracts in traditional companies, you'll get a 2-page employment contract. It's like, hey, don't steal money from the finance department or whatever. Fair enough, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's like, but nothing else is in there. Why? Because what they want to do is let as much be. And by the way, also don't do anything in the employee handbook that we can update at will. You know what I mean? So it's like, so the rules are super nebulous, right? But what a governance model does is say, let's think out as many things as humanly possible so that when there are disagreements, we don't have to have a conversation about it. How do you stay non-hierarchical? How do you stay decentralized? Well, when someone joins the federation, you basically say, look, we've already figured out how this stuff works. So if there's a disagreement, it's not like someone's going to run to me. They're going to say, we already decided when this happens, this is how we handle it. And in our case, what we did, and I think this is quite interesting, when we did find things that we couldn't settle on our own, in the beginning, when there was 10 of us or 15 of us, we'd throw a note out on Slack and just say, what do you guys think? We just basically do an informal vote. But in the end, when we got so large, there's hundreds of us now, we actually have an annual election and we let people vote a leadership team in. It's still not hierarchical, just to be clear, 5 Chameleon members, and they're there to make decisions for stuff. Some things it's like, yeah, it's not addressed. We don't want the whole collective every time one of these things happens, unless it's like a really, really big decision that impacts the whole collective. And we really will send a note out to the whole collective and poll everyone and decide how we're going to handle it, which I think is wild. I've never seen a company work that way before. During the blockchain craze days, there was this thing called a decentralized autonomous organization, or a DAO. We basically did the same thinking without anyone trying to build some tokenized, madness, basically.
Like, A lot of what you're saying is, hey, keep some things informal, like Slack,
Yeah,
decentralize. But the shared beliefs have to be codified as a
100%.
collective. And it sounds like that's the one thing that's what
If you
keeps it.
don't have a shared belief system with someone, you can make all the rules in the world. That is not a relationship that's going to last. I mean, if you can't agree on, like, if you're like, I can't do business with someone who's this, that's okay. You need to figure that out. For us, I think it's more about how do we see the world? What do we believe is the right way to share? What is the things we believe we'll want to share with each other? What are the things we're expecting from each other? What are the types of clients that we wanted to chase? What do we think is the right ethical decisions to make as a company? Those were shared belief systems that we really cared about.
At that point in time, you were doing contract to contract exploring and testing. How did you de-risk yourself? Like, was it like carving out specific amount of time that you would dedicate to it?
Yeah,
Money? Like, how did you think through that?
yeah, I mean, we we bootstrapped this thing. We're doing over 31 million a year in revenue now at this point, and we're going to try and double that in the next 3 years. But we've never taken investor on, never taken a single dollar of investment. And so in the beginning, one of the core tenets of our collective was everyone contributed a little bit of their revenue from clients. As you made money, you put a little bit in and almost put a little bit of time in. Our thing was you never put more than 8 hours each in per month. And if you got 5 people, 40 hours, a month is probably enough to do a small business. We even carved it up by role. We're like, hey, you're going to run the Twitter account, and you're gonna help with the bookkeeping stuff, and you're going to get this, you're going to make the sales decks. Just kind of chip away at things. But again, as a freelancer, all of those jobs are your problem. You know what I mean? Like if you're a solo entrepreneur, and we were like, well, we'll just split it up, and that gave us scale. So the idea is that we're all putting probably in about the same amount of time, maybe even less than we were when we were a solo operator, but we got more because we were sharing it all, right? And so the risk was fairly limited. And then as we got bigger and we started making more and more money, well, then we were like, well, let's put less time in, because the bit of money that we all chip in from our invoices is pretty significant. Let's hire our first ops person, and we'll get a fractional bookkeeper.
When did that happen? The first op. That's when you feel like, okay, we're
We
scaling.
got there in about a year. Yeah, we got there in about a year. Yeah. And so we were there pretty quickly. Frankly, again, as a collective, we decided, well, what are the things that are most painful to us? And then we, agreed on basically making those go away. We said, hey, we got a bit of money in the pot. What do we want to do with it? And that's collectivism, right? Some collectives might go, we all suck at biz dev. Let's co-invest in a salesperson, right? And other people, in our case, we're pretty good at generating opportunity. I don't want to deal with any of this ops and finance stuff. Over time, we added in marketing folks and great lawyers investing in our technology stack. But that was something we made up as a collective.
It sounds like you hired your first head of like ops 1 year in, but communities take a long time to build. When did you feel like, oh, we've got this collective coming, like we've got a collective? Like when did it feel like that?
It's a great question. It was always fun, because in the beginning, it was a lot of people that really, we still really like each other, but it was like we were all making money, all respected each other. It was always a good time. But I don't know if any of us really it probably was even 3 years in before we were like looking around, and they were like 40 of us here. Like this is pretty wild. And we picked up this huge client and this huge client. This is kind of like the real deal. And I think we started really, really taking it seriously. It was probably around year 3. By year, 5, I was like, this thing, this is really humming. And now, we're thinking about all kinds of interesting futures, so.
You know what I love about that number 40 is that sometimes people think collectives, communities are supposed to be big. And I know you're trying to scale it even more, but it can literally be 5 people. That's what's so powerful about the number. It's amazing even more if it can scale and keep like the heart of what it's meant to do. I'm trying to think of somebody looking at what their day-to-day is and like what is an actual problem I can solve. For you saw a lot of opportunities that you couldn't match at the time. How did you know that was scalable?
It's funny. I don't know. I'm not sure if I knew if I did. That was the funny thing about Chameleon Collective. It was kind of an unexpected company. For anyone watching your show, it's okay not to know. I think sometimes people need to feel this need of like every idea has to be so validated before you can go experiment with it. If you do that, you will find yourself in constant analysis paralysis. So my advice to people, and I think every brain is different, right? I would say that my brain will typically consider an idea. And if I'm like, definitively, I know it's not possible, I would say, okay, well, just scrap that. But if it's a maybe, I don't, a lot of people will stop, they'll cut the maybes out too. I don't cut any of the maybes out.
I
You know what I
love
mean?
that.
Like, I was like, that's interesting. And I can tell you, one of the things that's very different about today than was then, if I was a independent, consultant out there, a freelancer, Claude Code is the single most powerful bit of technology. One of the ones I've been working on over the weekend, calling it a command center for my life. It just like looks at all the different things I'm involved in and ingests them all and helps me understand where I should be prioritizing my attention at any given moment, just so I don't lose track of it all. And then helps coordinate that with my executive admin. And it's just, it's a productivity hack, right? If I can squeeze another 10, 15% out or another 20% out, I think that's going to be really important. And why is this so important? I think is we look at the next couple of years, all of us, especially freelancers and independents, are going to need to really rethink about themselves. And I'm going to use a phrase that I'm going to start using a lot. This concept of either a next-gen worker or a next-gen consultant. I think that clients, regardless of what your discipline are going to be looking for people that can come in and show them what the next generation of the future of work looks like. And this is not a world where AI, replaces all of us. This is a world where basically people come in and said, look, I'm the same price as this guy over here. I do the same work, but I have a 3x to 10x productivity level because I've taken the things that are in my head that make me special and I figured out how to do them faster, quicker, more consistently, more value for you at the same price. And that's how people become more valuable. So again, I'm not advocating for cheaper. I think the future is people are delivering more value consistently, and all of us are going to have to learn how to do that.
As we close, I feel like one of your most powerful thesis is the power of we is not just a collective. It can be in a corporation. How do brands, like other business models, apply what you've learned with a collective?
A definition of a collective can take on a lot of different forms. The main thing for me is about things being, equitable and whatever the terms are, right? Otherwise, it's lopsided partnership. And there's another company I'm involved in called Collective OS. It's a software platform specifically for the professional services world. Agencies and consulting firms basically saying, look, I do media and you do creative and you do international expansion or whatever. Let's form a collective. And the Collective OS basically helps manage that process between those firms so you can find partners and effectively operationalize those partnerships. Basically taking the Chameleon Collective concept and saying, well, what if it wasn't people in a collective, but it was companies in a collective? The same thing could apply in even traditional products. It doesn't have to be every aspect of the business. You could form a collective that is just around go-to-market activities, for example. Some people could even build collectives on the infrastructure side. They're like, hey, we have shared infrastructure. Let's co-invest in this infrastructure and we'll find a way to divvy up the resources that we generate. They've been doing this concept of collectives for hundreds of years, or really farming collectives and things like this, in the Middle Ages even. What makes it so interesting about today and what defines a modern collective is that the traditional corporation basically disrupted collectives because corporations brought scale and efficiency and infrastructure, and they started blowing up all these collectives. I think what's so fascinating with all the different tools, whether that is AI or social media, or shared tech experiences, even simple things like Google Workspace, are making it so that people can work in a decentralized fashion from wherever they are, anywhere in the world, and they can basically operate like a traditional corporation, have all the upside that a traditional company has, the scale and the infrastructure and the community and their brand reputation, everything else, except they're 5 times as nimble, because they don't have all the bureaucracy that makes them really slow. That decentralization, it's where it's at. And if you even look at like modern warfare, this is how they're redesigning military units to work out in these decentralized systems, because the control and command structure doesn't work anymore. The world moves too fast. I do believe that the collectives are the best form of capitalism. This isn't some hippie, I think people hear collectives and some people like somehow jump to like socialism or whatever. It's good for society. It's a better form of business. It's good for the workers as it is for the company. But it's also just a great way to run a business.
Yep.
I'd never go back to a traditional company given the opportunity to design it as a collective.
Yeah, the feeling of together, but without the feeling like you're giving more than you're taking in.
I've written a book called Collective Capitalism with two other authors, Paul Lewis and Juan Carlos Morales, and that's coming out soon. That explains a lot of this. And it really talks about like what we learned through Chameleon Collective. And it's not a book about Chameleon Collective. We just wanted more people to be able to do it. In fact, I would consider if I, was on my deathbed, hopefully a very long time from now, and reflecting on my life, I would consider that my most significant contribution to the world.
And maybe that's the bigger takeaway here. Community isn't something that just happens. It's something you build. It's something you have to keep choosing. And I don't know, I think I've felt that more and more lately. I'm sure you do too.